The day has come. You know that moment when your friend finally breaks up with the guy that you just knew was wrong for her, and you're sitting there biting your tongue, trying not to say, I told you so? Well, my friends, here we are. And if Carrie was a real person, and just a reminder, because I know a lot of us get emotional about it, these are all fictional characters. I would be empathetic towards her. And I'm glad that our girl has finally put herself first. So in this episode, we had a third breakup, maybe third time's a charm, two Real Housewives cameos, one very obvious, and the other only you'd catch if you're from Jersey through and through. And one kind of messy emotional unraveling that makes you yell at your screen and then maybe rewind and watch again. And yes, your comments from last week, I definitely saw them and listened in to hear if your name made it in this episode. Let's pour some tea and get into it, starting with our friends, Charlotte and Harry. Prostate surgery and vertigo. I mean, what a combination. And listen, as someone who has had two C-sections, I can absolutely say that peeing on your own after a surgery is definitely a big deal. You don't realize how much you take for granted until you can't do it by yourself. But the real moment was Charlotte laying on the bedroom floor shouting, Yay! Like it's a parade. And this is typical Charlotte, right? Always a cheerleader, even when the world is spinning, quite literally. So the takeaway for Charlotte is that she reminds us that mindset truly matters. And whether it's celebrating small wins or choosing to stay positive in uncomfortable moments, a cheerleader's mindset doesn't mean toxic positivity, because I know some of you are about that too. It means, though, choosing hope, choosing humor, and choosing to be real to yourself, even from the bedroom floor. Charlotte is always cheering everyone else on. But I really do wonder who's cheering her on. In the comments last week at Andy Rathbone and at Blue Turquoise mentioned that her friends aren't even there for her, like she's always there for them. And I wonder, do you think that this will ever come to light in the show, or is it just not Charlotte to ever bring it up? Moving on to our next favorite couple, LTW and Herbert. Herbert and the cheese, and now the pasta, and then the nutty buddy, and then the 1 pound. I knew something was simmering underneath. I called it episodes ago, and if you've been watching, you know. I knew there were some underlying issues there. Herbert has definite insecurities that have come up before, but in this episode, it is all up in our faces. Herbert is watching his waistline, which we get because, yes, he's in the middle of an election season. So I do understand wanting to look a certain way when you're out there in the public eye. But I think it's probably rooted in something deeper, because regardless of that, he's going after everything and everyone. And then the Ozempic moment. Yikes. And not once, but twice. And yes, there's humor. There's also insecurity, pressure, and I wonder if there are double standards here too. So the questions are here. First, on the Ozempic, it is part of our culture now and it's so accessible, but I'm sure that people have thoughts about it. Personally, don't, but I'm sure people are out there not happy about it. And the most important question, does someone's insecurities push their partners away? I thought about that when he calls her at work and she says, What are you doing calling me at work about that? And I really think that it has to do with just being interrupted about her flow with this nonsense, not because her and Marion, but I would love to see what you think. So the takeaways here are that insecurities don't always push people away on purpose, but I do wonder over the course of time, they can chip away at connection, especially if they show up as a comparison or a control type of issue. Lisa's surrounded by confidence and charm at work, so Herbert's self doubt may feel even louder in contrast. And in relationships, of course, it's not about being perfect, but it is about being secure in who you are, but also having that connection where you can dump when needed. But I wonder what you're thinking. Do you think that unspoken insecurities can slowly chip away at a relationship, even when there's love and laughter? But in this case, when there's a little bit of a threat out there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as we move on to Seema. So we are still on the topic of armpits. I mean, seriously though, Adam and the deodorant or lack thereof. And did he eat the deodorant? And then he says he doesn't like it, but he ate it and then he licks it. think maybe he even misses using it. And I wonder if this is about to kick off a new wave of like natural deodorant culture. I don't know. It's just not for me because really, again, who eats armpits? I've never seen that before. But anyway, jokes aside, the fact is that Seema gave it a try, and that for her specifically is a really big deal because this is a woman we know with very clear boundaries. And at this moment, what she's doing is that she's slowly testing the waters of being flexible, of being vulnerable, and trying something new. Yes, baby steps, but even the baby steps count. And then we get on to her office search. And this one hit home because I will share with you that as I sit here in my office in New Jersey, this office smells like spices, like garlic. There's a warehouse underneath and it's driving me bananas. I found the perfect location, who then turned me down for having a therapy dog. So I understand, as I'm sure some of you do, of really being on the hunt, whether it be for the perfect home or in this case, for the perfect office. And for at Eric Unrated out there, yeah, she's keeping the name, the Patel Group. I guess we have to start getting used to it. So she is dipping into her savings to invest in her next chapter, not just with space, but if you notice, also with the full-time assistant. And I hope she didn't go cheapo like she did with the lashes. But this, her investing in herself and in her profession and her career change really says a lot because she's not spending it all on stilettos like we've seen someone else do plenty of times in the past. She's really building something sustainable and she's serious about making this pivot. But let's go back to these armpits for a second. When she ran and then thank goodness for her travel size deodorant, I mean, relatable. I keep one in the car because you really never know. But sometimes love stinks, quite literally. But also, maybe it's the beginning of her softening her old rules. So the takeaway for Seema here is that sometimes growth, it doesn't show up as these big dramatic moments. Sometimes it's just quietly trying again, even when something feels off and even when something doesn't fit as part of the puzzle of what you had in your head for it to be. In past episodes, we saw Seema cutting corners, but now we see her really being responsible and investing in herself. And this is a major sign that she's choosing long term stability over short term comfort. So I forgive her for going to that last spot. Seema didn't just run from the smell or lack of deodorant. She actually stuck around long enough to give it a try. And it may not look like much, but all of these baby steps matter because learning to stay open, especially when you've been burned before, or especially when you're the one who's type A and used to being in control, that all takes a lot of courage, even if it comes to the side of armpit panic. So, question for you out there, let me know in the comments. Would you keep dating someone who refuses to wear deodorant, even if everything else felt right? Let's move on to Miranda, who surprisingly is still dating Joy. And I say that with the best of intentions because I'll tell you, when she started lying about the drink, I was about to get upset. And I know it was a short pivot there, but I was really getting upset. Like, come on, this is your chance. Because I thought she was going to pass up the opportunity again. But to Miranda's credit, she came clean. And it really stood out when she said, I'm sorry to bring this unfun and sober fact into this fun moment. And seeing her face, like you saw that it was difficult for Miranda in that moment. She had to pull herself out of that lie. And Joy, when she said, what I'm hearing is my gin is gone, I was expecting for her to lose it. Because as I mentioned in the last episode, with Joy, I'm still kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's probably not the best mindset to have, but it's kind of what we're used to seeing, especially with Miranda. So I'm just glad that it didn't drop in this episode. And then we go a little deeper when we hear Joy say, I don't like to feel bad about myself. And that's why I need a drink or two to dull that feeling. I'm sure that some of us can relate to that. And that right there, both women really pulling back the layers a bit, that was a big turning point in their relationship because it was a moment of true emotional vulnerability. Miranda showed up honestly, and Joy is starting to let us see a little bit of what she's carrying. And Cynthia Nixon, who is the actress who plays Miranda, filled the scene. You could feel every single layer of it. And I was truly impressed with the acting there. So the takeaways here, honesty doesn't always feel good in the moment, but it does build that kind of trust that pretending never can get to. Miranda showed that growth isn't about perfection, it's about pausing and owning your truth and being brave enough to say the hard thing out loud. And in relationships, whether it be romantic, platonic, or whatever it is, that kind of courage can truly change everything. So, my friends, do you think that Miranda and Joy can actually make it work long term, especially with such different relationships to alcohol? I guess we'll see what happens. And the person who is trying to go long term is Anthony, but he has a lot fighting against him with Gia. That dinner scene was so ridiculous. It gave us tons of laughs. Cue the salt and pepper shakers. And Anthony admitting that he's 62. He looks pretty good for his age, but there are a lot of important concepts in between all of these pieces of humor. Let's start with Anthony. I cannot believe, first of all, that he actually invited Gia to his home. Not only did he almost break bread with her, but clearly he did it out of love for Tippett. And that's a big deal. He's clearly serious about this relationship and he's willing to be the bigger person, or at least to try, although not in stature, especially according to Gia. Anyway, moving on. Gia, oh my goodness. I mean, from the fake apology to the three different accents that she let out in this scene to literally throwing plates like we were watching old school Housewives reunion. What in the Teresa is going on here? She's not just disapproving, she's deeply triggered. And we heard again that her ex was 30 years older, and clearly she's projecting all that pain onto Anthony. But instead of owning her wounds, he tries to disguise them with shade and snobbery. She legit said, "Get your old man ass out of my baby's life." And despite this, surprisingly, Anthony never lost himself. He stayed true to his sass, of course. He kept it classy ish, but he didn't match her exact energy. I love it when he said, "This sounds more like a you problem than a me problem." I thought that was gold because the truth is that you can hold boundaries without being disrespectful. And Anthony modeled that to a T. Meanwhile, when Giuseppe came in and then he just stood there in quiet shock, I wonder, was he in shock or was it really familiarity? Was he used to seeing this from his mom? And I'll say this, Anthony's committed to bread and love. And Gia, on the other hand, seems like she's just committed to chaos. So the takeaway here is that there is a difference between standing your ground and between losing your mind. Anthony managed to hold his own without completely losing his cool. And that is a learned skill that you learn over the course of time. In moments of conflict, we always have a choice. We can either react out of emotion or we can respond with intention. And I call this temperance, which is a pillar in my mindful living framework. And through my Free to Be Mindful podcast and public speaking topics are all based on this framework that really shows us how to show up in life as our best selves, which is knowing about when to pause and when to respond, or when to act like Gia, who skipped the whole pause moment and just went straight to the plate throwing. I would say to Gia, your cup is definitely runneth over. So the question here for you all is, was Giuseppe surprised or was he familiar with his mom's level of crazy? And if you were Gia with this past experience and your kid was in this situation dating someone so much older, would you have gone to these crazy extremes? All right, we've really been looking at everybody in pairs for today, from Charlotte and Harry to LTW and Herbert, Seema and Adam, Miranda and Joy, Anthony and Gia. But my friends, I refuse to say Carrie and Aidan. I just refuse. And even though, yes, we'll dive all into his drama and shenanigans, I refuse to say Carrie and Aidan because their story has become its own book to this point. And I break their book down here, their scenes, into 5 different chapters, but I'm just so over it and I'm glad that it has come to an end. The preface of this book is her click-clacking around the house. She's back to heels in the house. Well, I guess Duncan has lightened up or the writer's room just forgot. I don't know. But here we go into these chapters that I've broken down all of their shenanigans in. Chapter 1, the pissing match. Carrie's face seeing Aidan outside the door with Duncan says it all. I mean, how dare he is right. And remember, by the way, 20 years ago when Carrie invited Big to Aidan's cabin, this whole scene was very reminiscent of that. And back then, Aidan couldn't believe that she had brought big, and then he got drunk and he even had to sleep there. And here is Aidan doing the damage 20 years later, which is funny because Duncan doesn't even seem to be threatened by Aidan at all. Him and his pipe and his leather half loafers. It's almost as though he knows exactly what's going on, like he's been perhaps in this position before. And he is as confident as a cucumber and is totally unfazed by Aiden's shenanigans. Carrie defends Duncan's pipe not once, but twice. And the minute Aidan mentions having kids is the best decision with his ex, he was looking for the cosign. He definitely didn't get one. And you can see Carrie's energy in her face shift. And then he thought he was going to lean in and she just pulled away and kept it going. Major diss. So we hear Carrie's self-awareness in her scene with Seema when she says that Aiden's threatened by her because she cheated on him with Big. And at first, I'll tell you, I thought that Aidan was just being threatened by another man, period. Not because of their history together, though. And I thought this because 20 years is a long time. You think that one can let it go, but clearly he could not. But it did irk me when Carrie said that she didn't want to talk to Aidan about this. And she states, I'm too happy to bring up the past, much like Miranda not wanting to talk to Joy about the alcohol last week. And it really bothered me because, again, she showed in this moment that old patterns were coming up again as she was holding on to false hope for dear life when there's so many red flags literally waving and like beaming in her face. Chapter 2 of the breakdown here is desperation. Starting with Duncan saying, it's your man, Carrie embarrassedly talks to Aidan in the middle of the very gross looking doorway, by the way. Did anybody else catch that? Aidan with the I've got steaks. He was like a puppy wagging a tail. Come on, dude. I sat there rolling my eyes thinking, you just got to be kidding me. And then I'll tell you, I got mad at Carrie again because here she is trying to be delicate with his feelings, saying, I don't think you get it. Like, no, we've got to stay. Meanwhile, when she was in Virginia and he stopped talking to her and gave her major attitude right before the cake cutting, that was very telling on who was doing more of the trying and very telling, really, of Aidan's character. She is trying to the point of excessiveness, and she clearly knows this too because she was beyond annoyed as she was letting Aidan down carefully, but she still didn't put herself first at this point. Chapter 3, the fight. Before the fight actually got going, did anyone else think to themselves, why are those steaks not in the fridge? When she walked by them, I just felt like, hello, put him away. But when she got in the bed and he said, get away from me, you smell like smoke. I hope you notice that he didn't even hug her back, right? She was trying to cuddle, get in comfortable, and he didn't even do anything to embrace her. So at this point, he's disgusted with her, but I want you to clearly see that it's not because of the smoke, at least not at first. What he was disgusted with was that she put herself first and didn't put him first. And clearly, he didn't mind the smoke when he was sitting out there with Duncan trying to get all the deets, right? But then all of a sudden, he was bothered. Aidan here just used the smell of smoke to blame it on something else. And listen, I do get the smelling like smoke thing. I personally don't like the smell and I don't engage. But when my husband occasionally smokes a cigar, I do say, dude, go shower first, right? Before getting into bed. And I was proud of Carrie when she went to sleep in a different room because, again, she put herself first. She stuck to her guns and to her boundaries, and she didn't fall for Aidan's, oh, is this because I talked to him line? I mean, por favor. He knew exactly what he was doing both occasions. Chapter 4, makeup scene gone wrong. The next morning, notice that Aidan, cooking her breakfast, wanted to pretend as if nothing was wrong because that's easier, right? And it suits him. And that who's going for a walk scene, very reminiscent of 20 years ago. And I'll tell you, I don't care about the cursing. I curse all the time, not on video. But when he started cursing over and over again, beginning with that exact scene, I found it repulsive. And that was him, again, just trying to assert his power, his dominance, and trying to manipulate her. But I was impressed that she even showed up to the lunch because I really didn't think that she would. After she sat down, Aidan pretends like he's about to apologize. And I say pretending to apologize because he said, if you caught it, I do have trust issues with other men. And before Carrie cut him off, he was about to say, it didn't help that we were both hungry. And he was like, dot, dot, dot. He was going to go on there. His apology, if that's what he was trying to do, was not genuine because he was about to rope her in again and manipulate her some more. Chapter 5 now, the breakup. You know how in every teener bopper football movie, when the quarterback somehow ends up running the football and he makes the right moves all through the field and finally gets to the end zone and scores the winning pain point? That's how I felt, my friends, watching Carrie when she said, can you stop blaming me? I have done nothing. How is it possible that I haven't earned your trust? I have agreed to arrangements that you yourself couldn't even live up to. I was 100% in. Oof, when she had that monologue there, I was rooting her on because it was like, finally, girl, finally, you've said what you've thought. You've said what everybody else knew, what we all knew, but you finally admitted it out loud. And that is really hard to do. And instead of Eden acknowledging that he was the one who slept with his ex wife, he calls her out on the past tense, present tense thing. Do you see his pattern here? Again, trying to rope her in so that he always stays on top, so that he always has the upper hand and blames her. And in the comments, many of you have disagreed with me, stating that Carrie has shown zero growth. And listen, it may have taken her 20 years, but she is finally stopped putting a man first. And finally, she chooses herself first. When she said, I can't give you more than I have, and it wasn't enough. And then there's all that family stuff. Again, it was as though she didn't want to admit that the family stuff wasn't an issue. But I kept saying all these episodes, she changed after that Virginia episode. And that's when it all started to really become real to her. And then Aidan, when he said, I need 100%. No, Aidan, no, you don't need 100%. Apparently, what you need is 1,000% because this whole relationship has been imbalanced from the very get go. Moving on to the close of the book, chapter 6, the aftermath. Could that ending scene have been any more melancholy? I mean, was that a Taylor Swift song? I'm assuming it was. I think it sounded like her. And she was talking about a breakup, so it must have been her. And then when Carrie removes the postcards from the wall, it was like old school changing your status on Facebook. Do people still do that? I don't know. I'm old. But the act of doing it makes it so real, which I'm glad because I hope that she doesn't go back on these very real feelings. And I'm glad that in that big house of hers that she at least has her cat to provide her comfort. I'm a therapy dog owner, but I guess cats can provide that comfort too. And then that final scene with all the women in the diner, it was very reminiscent of when Carrie came back from Paris after that whole thing with Petrovsky. It's just nice to see her getting support and hopefully her turning a new leaf. How was Charlotte there with vertigo? I don't know, but all in all, it was really nice to see. So the whole takeaways with Carrie here to sum it all up. Sometimes we hold on to a version of love or onto a version of anything that we just want it to work, even when the present version is waving red flags left and right. Carrie finally stopped romanticizing the past and looked at what was actually in front of her. A man who needed more than she could or should actually give. And this time, she chose herself. And that, my friends, is really the pivotal moment of growth. And while Carrie said that Aidan's behavior was because of her history when she cheated on him with Big, and Aidan alluded to that as well, I honestly think that he probably would have acted like that regardless of her history. Aidan is very insecure, and sleeping with his ex wife made his conscience act up. And I think that's why he ended up making these choices. What do you think there? And lastly, Carrie mentioned that she's moved mountains and apartments. And I do wonder if she's low key mad at herself about giving up her apartment to live alone again in this huge house. Because if you remember, she gave up her apartment because of Aidan. It was he who said that he couldn't go into her apartment. And then that's why she got this big house. So, my friends, trust is a hard thing to put back together. There's no denying that there's love between Carrie and Aidan. How could there not be after all these years? But love alone isn't always enough, especially when one or both people are still clinging to old versions of themselves and of each other. And as the voiceover said so perfectly, they were still locked in the past, which meant, of course, they had no future. Some might say that this breakup was karma for Carrie, but let's not ignore the nuance that people do mature, people do learn, grow. And in this case, Carrie did. It took her forever, but she really did. And she finally stopped chasing the story that she had written in her head, even if it means walking away from the person you once thought would be your forever. And that, my friends, is the tea. But wait real fast. Did you catch that teaser at the end? Do you think that something's going to pop off between Carrie and Duncan? Well, I don't know. I kind of don't want it to, but it sure alluded to that. Drop your thoughts to this question and all the others in the comments. I love continuing the conversation with you. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe so that you don't miss all of the shorts dropping throughout the week. Until we meet again next Thursday, I'll see you then.